We just moved into a new rental. It had 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and it was on a quiet street. It was a kind of place that feels perfect until you live in it. A few days after settling in, I decided to take my girlfriend to the cinema as a little treat. Everything was normal until something strange happened. While we were waiting for the movie to start, I got up to use the toilet. On my way back to the cinema hall, I saw my girlfriend walking towards me, telling me that she suddenly needed to use the bathroom herself. Thinking nothing of it, I went back inside the cinema hall. But this is when I saw the first anomaly. She was already in a seat scrolling on a phone. She hadn't moved. To say I was confused was an understatement, but I brushed it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the lighting was strange. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I decided to ignore it. That night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of someone moving around downstairs. I noticed that the lights were on, and the smell of the cooking drifted up the hall. I found my girlfriend in the kitchen, calmly making pancakes like it was breakfast time. When I asked what she was doing, her response was, "This is my time to cook," as if that explained anything. I told her I was going to go upstairs to change my clothes and then I'll be back down to join her. But when I returned, the kitchen was dark, empty and silent. My girlfriend was nowhere to be seen until I returned to the bedroom and found her asleep. As much as I was confused, I was equally tired, but as I laid in bed, I couldn't quite get these odd anomalies out of my mind. Over the next few days, the strange moments carried on. We planned to go to McDonald's for a guilty cheat meal, as she had taken the day off so we could eat together. It felt real, it was completely normal, but when I got into my car to drive home, there was no one sitting on any of the other seats. Thinking that she may have just gone off somewhere else, I decided to call her, and that was when I found out that she was at work. She hadn't taken a day off, and she hadn't been near a McDonald's at all. The same night, a new toothbrush appeared in the bathroom, with a note that said, "From your girlfriend." When I questioned her about it, she denied ever putting it there. And then, when I tried to show her, the toothbrush was gone. Every time I thought I had solid proof, something physical or tangible, it vanished. It was almost like this house was erasing my sanity piece by piece. One night, around 3 a.m., I heard laughing downstairs. It was soft and playful at first. Then it was just wrong. I found her in the kitchen again, standing with her back to me. When she finally turned around, her voice wasn't hers. It was deep, distorted, like 2 voices speaking at once. Blood was dripping from her mouth. Her eyes seemed to be black, and she had this smile that was eerily stretched too wide. The next thing I noticed was her raising her hand with a knife in it. She then accused me of cheating whispering that she was going to kill me. Feeling threatened, I ran upstairs, only to see my real girlfriend waking up in bed. She looked annoyed at me, and she told me she couldn't deal with me playing games anymore. I managed to convince her to stay, as I told her that I would buy cameras and set them up around the house. I needed proof. We needed proof. The next night, I checked the footage and I saw her again. This other version. Her face flickered. Her eyes were blackened like she wasn't human. There was blood dripping from her mouth again, and she appeared to be dancing slowly in the flickering light. When I went to show this footage to my girlfriend, the footage played back nothing. A perfectly normal empty room. There was no movement, no sound, and no figure. At this point, she had had enough, and she told me to get myself checked out with the doctors while she goes and spends a few days with the family. But here's the strange thing. The moment she had walked out, I had no other strange occurrences happen since. For the first time since we moved into that rental, the nights were silent. Nevertheless, something still bothered me, and maybe the silent nights is what I needed to recall a memory clearly. I remember meeting her ex-boyfriend, and he had taken me to the side to warn me about her when we first started dating. I'd never taken him seriously before, but now I was desperate for answers. Digging out his number, I gave him a call. When he realized who I was, I could hear his tone change. He asked me if I had been seeing her in multiple places, and whether I felt it wasn't her. Desperately, I agreed that I had. He told me to get out of her life if I want to value my sanity. Then halfway through his conversation, he screamed. It wasn't a startled scream. It was more like a shocking scream, like when someone had seen someone that they thought they'd escaped from. The call disconnected in the process. After about a minute, his number rang me back, and I picked up. That's when I heard her voice, the deep, distorted one. That's when she told me that I am next. At that point, I knew my life was in danger. I immediately left and went into a hotel. Once there, I ditched my phone. I had just heard another man die on the phone, and I was going to be next. I decided to write a letter to the police and keep myself anonymous. I simply wanted to get out of this town, and took some time staying at my parents' house. After living the last 5 years as a shell of my former self, and after much encouragement from my parents to get back into the dating game, I reluctantly agreed to do so. I couldn't tell them what I knew, and simply wanted to forget about it. Now, I'm married, living in another town much further away, living quietly. I don't see any strange shadows. I don't hear any new midnight whispers. I don't see any impossible sightings. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder, did she leave because she chose to? Or is she somewhere out there, wearing a new face, and simply waiting for me to recognize her. One day, my neighbor called me and asked if I could babysit her baby while she and her husband went out for dinner. She told me she needed me from 6 p.m. till midnight, and I agreed. When I arrived at 6 p.m., she met me at the door, and just before leaving, she told me to keep all the lights on, as the midnight man won't like it if they're turned off. I laughed awkwardly and asked what she meant, but she didn't answer. She just left with her husband. I thought I was here to babysit a baby, but there was no baby anywhere in sight. I checked around in all the bedrooms and nothing. Instead, I was left with some creepy warning about a midnight man. The air smelled stale, almost as if the house hadn't been lived in for a long time. I theorized she probably wanted me to house sit, so I sat in the living room and turned the TV on, watching random programs to pass the time. After a while, I decided to turn off one of the lights, a habit that I have for wanting mood lighting at home. Suddenly, I heard a noise from the kitchen. When I went to investigate, I saw that all the cupboards were open. The fridge was wide open too. Everything had been closed when I first arrived. I was sure of it. I told myself maybe I really should keep the lights on. As I switched the kitchen light back on, something tall moved in the corner of my vision. But when I looked properly, there was nothing there. I returned back to the living room and noticed the TV was off as well. I knew for certain that I didn't turn it off, but I sat down and turned it on again. That was when the house phone rang. When I answered, I didn't hear anyone speak. The only thing that I heard was heavy, slow breathing. I decided to hang up immediately. By around 8 p.m., I was trying to distract myself with TV again, but then suddenly, the image on screen froze. That's when I got the fright of my life, when all the characters on screen slowly turned their heads and stared directly at me. I freaked out and shut the TV off. Trying to keep myself distracted, I started using my phone, but about 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps upstairs. My stomach dropped. I knew no one was supposed to be here, so when I went upstairs, I found that all the lights were off. I began checking the rooms one by one, turning every light back on, and found nobody up there. Once I turned around to go back downstairs, that's when I felt something touch my back. But when I turned, there was no one behind me. Then, the temperature dropped suddenly, and I heard a whisper. "You're not alone." I bolted downstairs and waited, frozen with fear. After about 15 minutes with no further activity, my nerves calmed enough for me to think rationally again. I sat on the sofa, listening for anything unusual. None of this made any sense. I wasn't babysitting anyone. There was no baby. Why was I even here? Then the TV turned itself back on again, and I saw the same characters staring at me again. I panicked. I tried to switch the TV off, but the remote wouldn't work, so I ended up smashing the TV. That was it. I decided that I needed to leave this house immediately. I made my way towards the front door, but it was locked. I searched for the keys, feeling frustrated and scared. That was when the entire house went dark. Terrified, I pulled out my phone and turned the torch on. The beam flickered and then shut off. Heavy breathing filled the darkness. I fumbled with my phone, tapping it desperately until the torch finally lit again. Then the breathing stopped. By now it was 11 p.m. One more hour. Footsteps echoed upstairs again, followed by a distorted laugh. I climbed the stairs cautiously. A hand waved in the corner of my vision, but disappeared every time I looked. Cold fingers brushed the back of my neck. My torchlight went out again. I could then feel that something stood behind me, breathing, laughing softly. I couldn't scream, and I couldn't move. Finally, I got the torch back on. The TV upstairs then flickered on, showing the same characters whispering my name from downstairs. Everything about the house felt wrong. At 11:45 p.m., with 15 minutes left, I could hear furniture scraping across the floor behind me, whispering, surrounding me, and whispers of my name over and over. I chose to ignore it and not look back. I noticed the clock on the wall had vanished. My phone's clock were frozen on repeated 8s. While searching the hallway, I found an old rotary phone lying on the floor. It began to ring, so I picked it up, and when I did, the power had returned in the house. Lights flicked on everywhere. Everything started to look normal again. That's when the clock on my phone was showing me 12 a.m. I was relieved, but the next sound I heard made me even more happier. It was the front door. My neighbor stood there, smiling at me. She asked me if I had fun with the Midnight Man. I was too shaken to respond. She handed me my money and told me to leave before it decided to follow me. I was confused with this statement, but I was not willing to stay another second longer. I decided to run home. Later that night, I got a message from an unknown number. The message read, "You should never have come here. It might have followed you home." What unsettled me more was the fact that my neighbor's contact was already stored in my phone, but this wasn't her number. It was an unknown number. I panicked and called the police, telling them I suspected intruders at the address. When they arrived, I waited anxiously outside, and after what seemed like 30 minutes, they came back out and told me the house was completely empty. A senior officer approached me and said he was surprised I reported activity there, because that place had been abandoned for 6 years. I told him a woman and her husband lived there, and I even saw them with my eyes. He shook his head, stating that they went missing 6 years ago. The officers left shortly after. The whole experience unnerved me so much that I packed my things and moved far away. I never heard from the Midnight Man again, and I pray I never do. But there's one thing that still puzzles me to this day. Who gave me the money? I used to love playing Twisted Metal. It's a vehicular, combat-style gameplay that made it a huge contrast from other video games on the market, and the characters had a lot of charm to them. My favourite character out of all of them was definitely Sweet Tooth. His unrepentant brutality and wisecracking mouth made him an instant icon of the series. He's more or less the mascot of the franchise, and it's hard to imagine a Twisted Metal game without him. Playing the game as a kid, he scared the hell out of me, but now I can't help admiring him as a villain. One day, I found myself growing nostalgic for the Killer Clown, so I decided to boot up my old PS2 to play my favourite game in the series, TM Black. I inserted the disc into the console, but nothing happened. I repeated this process several times, only to reach the same result. The unfortunate reality that my game disc was damaged then dawned on me. This naturally pissed me off, since I invested countless hours into this near masterpiece. All was not lost, however. I knew of a comic book shop that specialized in selling old and obscure media. Their video game selection was paltry, but I figured it was the fastest way to get the game at a reasonable price. It took a long but well worth it train ride to downtown Toronto to reach my destination. I clenched firmly to the hood of my coat as the harsh winter winds collided with my face. Snowfall was sure to come soon, so hunkering down in my apartment with my favorite game was looking ideal. Greg, the owner of the shop, stared daggers into me as soon as I arrived. He's kinda weird like that. He had this shaggy black hair and heavy sunken eyes that made him look like the type of guy you'd bump into a dark alleyway. Greg's never really bothered with me before, so I tried not to pay him any mind. Still, it's hard not to wonder what goes on in his creepy little mind. The way he looks at female customers always gives the chills. I'd be surprised if he didn't have some kind of rap sheet. I walked past aisles of comics and headed straight to their modest video game section. My eyes scanned on each title in my hunt for Black. To my dismay, it wasn't there. Did I come all this way for nothing? Not wanting to admit defeat just yet, I asked Greg if he had the game in stock. He just stared at me for a few seconds before giving a creepy smile and led me to the back of the shop. There was a whole row of games and DVDs with pitch black covers. He handed me a case with Twisted Metal Black, which had a crudely drawn picture featuring Sweet Tooth. "What the heck is this?" I asked. "It's the game you wanted. It's a used copy, so it didn't come with its original cover. Decided to give it a makeover," Greg replied in his gravelly voice. I remained skeptical of the game's quality, but bought it regardless. I joked to myself that this would be like owning a rare collector's item. My excitement lasted the entire train ride back home. I quickly inserted the disc inside my PlayStation and watched the screen come to life. Maybe it's because it's been a while since I've played the game, but the intro was different from what I remembered. There was a much heavier focus on Sweet Tooth, who was often slashing at unseen victims with his large knife. A blood splatter briefly appeared on the screen before the screen shifted to a blurry image of him sitting in an apartment room. This was incredibly strange, because none of the games ever featured the characters in a home environment. Once the game finished booting up, I had the time of my life playing through Sweet Tooth's route. His story of being a serial killer clown who killed Calypso in his own ending remained as iconic as ever. It was so satisfying to finally turn the tables on that sadistic mastermind. My entertainment soon turned into confusion upon seeing the credits finish rolling and displaying the title, Total Metal Lost, on screen. What the hell was going on? TM Lost is a bonus feature that was only featured in special editions of TM Head-On. So, it would have been impossible for my copy of Black to have it. Greg definitely modded the disc, but I wasn't complaining. Little surprises like this will always get a warm welcome from me. At least that's what I thought before finding out what the game truly had in store for me. Immediately after selecting the Lost mode, Sweet Tooth's guttural laugh blared from my speakers. The scene then showed Sweet Tooth running around in an asylum with his iconic cleaver in hand. Asylum workers would spawn sporadically throughout the stage, and I controlled Sweet Tooth to cut them all up. I was loving this mod more and more with every second. It was like I was experiencing the true Sweet Tooth. A seasoned serial killer, unrestricted by the confines of a car. He was free to slaughter indiscriminately, and I was in full control of his mayhem. By the time I was done, the asylum was left painted in blood. Once the level was complete, the screen faded to black before an image of Sweet Tooth sitting in a wooden chair appeared.
"Hello, John. Having fun yet?"
I felt my body jolt in surprise. Sweet Tooth had just said my name. Even if Greg modded this game, how could he know that I would be the one to buy it? Just how many more surprises did he have up his sleeve?
"Looks to me like you're gonna be having a hell of a time cutting those pigs up. Can't say I blame ya. Just don't forget that this is still my game and you have to play by my rules. The next level should be something very familiar. Let's play a game of hide and seek. You be the scared little lamb, and I'll be the butcher that serves you on a platter. See you soon."
A wicked cackle roared from my speakers before a loading screen of a smiling Sweet Tooth popped up. My blood ran cold when I saw what stage was next. It was my city. More specifically, it was a supermarket near my neighborhood. I find it hard to believe that Greg had only coincidentally modded my neighborhood into one of my favorite games. Had he been stalking me? The attention to detail was immaculate. Greg had perfectly replicated the streets and stores surrounding the market, down to the chips of paint on their signs. It was all so uncanny. I watched Sweet Tooth walk through the crowded streets while brandishing his cleaver without anyone noticing him. He was completely invisible to everyone but me. Sweet Tooth dashed down several blocks, gradually getting closer to my neighborhood. Fear swelled in my heart as Sweet Tooth approached my home with his bloody cleaver, shining radiantly. I immediately unplugged my PS2 and locked my bedroom door. Bullets of sweat raced down my head as I ruminated about what just happened. Greg was one sick fuck for making something like this. Was this his idea of a joke? He must have been some sort of messed up stalker. Just as I was about to curse him out over the phone, a loud bang at my door froze me solid. It was a kind of unhinged, violent bang that made it clear whoever was on the other side had vile intentions. I weakly walked over to the peephole to see who it could be, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Those baggy white pants and macabre mask were unmistakable. Sweet Tooth was at my door, with his face mere inches away from the hole. What the hell was going on? I had no explanation for what I saw, but there, Sweet Tooth was looking like he wanted to make my head roll. I at first thought it was Greg continuing his prank on me, but Sweet Tooth's physique is far too different. Greg was more on the lean side, while Sweet Tooth is incredibly stocky. To make matters worse, this man's head was aflame, and yet he didn't seem to be in the slightest bit of pain. I immediately barricaded my door with whatever furniture I had and locked myself in my upstairs bedroom. I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but for some reason, it wasn't working. All I got was static on the speaker. I barely had enough time to wonder what was going on when I heard a loud crash come from downstairs. Loud stomps echoed throughout my apartment and quickly drew closer to me. My heart felt just about ready to burst from my chest. I couldn't believe that Sweet Tooth was about to kill me. The pounding at my door grew louder by the second, and it felt like the walls were closing in on me. In my panic, I almost forgot about my fire escape. I dashed out of the window and to the metallic balcony, just in time to hear my door burst open. Not taking a second to look back, I bolted down each ladder with frantic energy. My mind was focused solely on getting the hell out of there. Once my feet touched the concrete, I was prepared to run to the nearest police station. But to my horror, Sweet Tooth had just landed right in front of me. He cackled a hideous laugh, before the tip of his cleaver was embedded in my stomach. Mind-numbing pain consumed every part of my mind, and the only thing that I could do was cry and puke up blood. The last thing I saw before blacking out was Sweet Tooth standing over me, laughing menacingly. When I woke up, I could hardly believe I was still alive. I sat in a hospital room with a whole bunch of tubes connected to me. After the nurses let the police know that I was awake, they came over to interrogate me. All I could tell them was that someone dressed as a clown broke into my apartment and tried to kill me. No way were they going to believe that some video game character had come to life to annihilate me. It was obvious that the police search would lead nowhere. I never went back to that comic shop after that day. Whoever Greg is, he's a creepy bastard that everyone should stay the hell away from. I can't even enjoy playing Twisted Metal anymore without thinking of that horrific incident. To anyone hearing this, keep yourself safe and never go to the Magnific Noir comic shop. My wife Leah has the most beautiful blue eyes I have ever seen. From the very first moment we met, those ice blue marbles of hers knocked me off my feet. She always gets compliments whenever we go out, and her Instagram posts are never short on comments. I mention this because something truly bizarre began to happen shortly after we moved into our new home. A few months ago, we purchased a quaint Victorian fixer-upper on a small piece of countryside property. Nothing extravagant, just a couple of acres for the two of us to get some fresh air. Most of the land was taken up by a long, winding driveway in front of the house, so the acreage didn't really amount to much. I'm a fairly established editorial writer for an online media site, so my work can be done anywhere with electricity and stable Wi-Fi. Leah is a social media manager for a prominent construction company, and her work is entirely remote as well. Since we're both in our 30s with no children or offices tying us to the city, it seemed like the perfect time to escape the hustle and enjoy each other's company. A friend of a friend introduced us to a real estate agent who had recently sold their parents a vacation home. Soon after, the agent sent us a listing he thought would be perfect. A few days later, we were driving up the winding driveway to what would become our first real home together. The transition from cramped city apartments filled with sirens and artificial lights to the warm glow of a sunset view from a rocking chair on the back patio was breathtaking. The house was older and needed some fixing up, but from the moment we walked in, we both knew this is where we wanted to live. Once moved in, one of my favorite features became the expansive entryway. A remarkable stained glass window sat above the front door, and a decorative, ornate mirror was affixed to the wall beside it. Leah and I placed a rustic wooden credenza beneath the mirror as a spot for keys, wallets, and other essentials. It felt almost ceremonious to retrieve our keys from the bowl each time we left the house. I may sound theatrical, but the house made me feel a little like royalty. After a week, Leah had gotten into the habit of primping in front of the large mirror before we went out. I would patiently wait on the couch in the next room, admiring her as she adjusted her hair and inspected her reflection. That's when I first noticed something strange. One day, while waiting for her to finish getting ready, I was scrolling through emails on my phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leah approach the mirror for her usual final checks. I looked up, asking if she was nearly ready. She rolled her stunning blue eyes at me with an annoyed smirk. I sighed, amused, and turned back to my phone. But just as I looked down, I noticed something odd. Have you ever seen something that doesn't quite register correctly in your mind? That was the feeling I got. I looked back up at the mirror, and my wife's reflection had emerald green eyes, not her usual blue. I shut my eyes tightly, wondering if my phone had somehow strained my vision. When I opened them again, the green eyes remained. I pointed it out to Leah, but she laughed it off, saying it was probably the sunlight filtering through the stained glass window above the door that tinted her reflection. I considered the possibility, but before I could press further, she turned to me, asking how she looked. Her dazzling blue eyes stared at me expectantly. Caught off guard, I complimented her, dismissing the bizarre moment, and we headed out. Over the next few weeks, the strange phenomenon continued. I noticed a stark difference in the color of her reflected eyes when she stopped to fix her hair or apply lipstick in the entryway mirror. I even checked my own reflection when she wasn't around. My eyes remained the same shade of brown they had always been. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but life went on, and we settled into the house. Then one Friday morning, I woke up alone in our bed, which was unusual, since I was normally the first one up. I called out to Leah, but there was no answer. Wandering through the house, I realized I was truly alone. I considered calling her, but that's when I remembered Leah's father had recently gotten ill, and she had planned to visit him for the weekend. I had completely forgotten. I spent the weekend in my home office, writing, editing, and submitting work, losing myself so deeply that I didn't check my phone or confirm her return. By Sunday, I finally pulled myself away from the computer, realizing I hadn't heard from her all weekend. I checked my phone hoping for a message or voicemail. Nothing. I called a number and it went straight to voicemail. Concern grew. Leah never turned her phone off, especially while traveling alone. I then decided to call her father, hoping for an explanation. Maybe Leah had a broken phone or was running late. Instead, he sounded confused. He hadn't seen her all weekend. She hadn't visited as planned, and he assumed she was busy or unwell. Panic surged through me. If she hadn't gone to her father and wasn't answering her phone, who knew where she might be? I considered calling the police, mentally listing the places she could have gone. Then, the sound of keys turning in the front door snapped me out of my panic. My heart raced as the door swung open, and I ran downstairs to the familiar sound of her shoes on the entryway floor. I embraced her tightly, asking where she had been. She said she had gone to see her father, as she told me weeks ago. I paused, not just because of the lie, but because she was staring at me with two piercing green eyes. She said she was tired from a long trip and would head to bed early. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded as she ascended the stairs. But just before she did, she stopped at the large mirror in the entryway. I froze as I saw her reflection. Bright blue eyes staring back instead of green. If you are based in the UK and would like to enjoy freshly batch roasted coffee delivered to your door, visit vitalcoffee.co.uk and use the coupon code mrfreakystory to get 10% off from all products. I will leave a link in the description below.